So Star Trek exploration, let's see what's out there, to boldly go, right? And in the original series and in Next Generation, fans complained or observed, I guess, observed and complained some that there was no depiction of gay characters. And of course, there's a difference between main cast members, say, cast, on the starship itself, crew members that were either supporting players recurring, like, for example, Lieutenant Barclay or Ensign Rowe, and our guest star, or just say someone in the, say in 10 Forward, like a gay or lesbian couple holding hands. So that had been sort of the dialogue and the discussion ever since the original series. And so over the years, people have said, well, Gene Roddenberry wanted gay characters, but he never pushed for it enough, or he never fulfilled his promise, because on more than one occasion, when he was talking to fans or George Takei, and that's the famous story that we'll get into, he was saying how he'd like to have gay characters, he wanted to have them, but that he don't think he could. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people forget. A television show is produced by a team of writer-producers, directors, a staff. And in the original series case, it was Gene Roddenberry who was the showrunner, the creator and showrunner. But there is a studio staff of executives, and they will yay or nay something. Now, they're not concerned with every episode of the show, the day-to-day operations. But back then, and I'm sure now as well, they would get the scripts. They would know the big things that, say, Gene or whomever showrunner was going to do. The real important things, introducing new characters. Then they have to get someone in. Say when Whoopi Goldberg was hired, Michelle Forbes for Ensign Rowe for Next Generation. So what I'm saying is I think a lot of people forget, and even some of the writers or actors themselves, looking at, say, Gene Roddenberry in the original series or Rick Berman in Next Generation. So the main story that started it is that George Takei said that back when they were filming the original series, there was a pool party. Gene Roddenberry had a party at his house. It was a pool party. So Gene was swimming sort of at the far end alone, sort of. And George said, hey, George Takei's like, let me go and speak to Gene. So he went over, he swam over, and he said, kind of pitched, like, why don't we have gay characters on the original series? So George says that Gene said, it's a great idea, I want to do it. But, and this is from a PBS interview, Takei said Roddenberry wanted to have gay characters, but said he feared that network execs would balk and might cancel the show. Takei described Roddenberry telling him, quote, I'd like to do that, but he said, I'm walking a tightrope. The interracial kiss was very controversial. And of course, the interracial kiss that he's speaking and referring to and speaking about is the famous William Shatner, Nichelle Nichols, Captain Kirk, and Lieutenant Uhura kiss in the episode Plato's Stepchildren. And even though that was sort of a forced alien powers were making them do it, they still kissed on the air. And many, I guess, really old-fashioned or racist were like, no, we don't want this. And I think it was either not outright banned, but I think it was either delayed or maybe a couple network affiliates didn't air that episode or were really complaining about it. So this is what George Takei says, that Roddenberry definitely wanted to introduce either, I guess, a recurring or guest character, but he was afraid the executives, at Desilu and NBC would not approve. And again, like I'm saying, that, goes into the idea that a show is not just greenlit and managed and run by one showrunner, producer, creator. It is an executive team as well. They have the final say because they have the purse strings and they're producing the television show. Then we go into Star Trek The Next Generation, where a writer that every fan knows, David Gerrold, he wrote the famous Trouble with Tribbles, one of the funniest, one of the most popular original series episodes. So he was hired on by Roddenberry for Next Generation. And I guess it was like some kind of party or fan, function where Gene Roddenberry said, we'll definitely, there were thousands of people gathered. And David said that Gene Roddenberry said, we're going to have gay characters on the show, and for Next Generation. And David said it never happened. This is an interview with him. Quote, the time to introduce gay crew members would have been at the beginning of Next Generation. And even though Gene Roddenberry had made that promise, it never happened. It was one of the many promises that were broken. And it was one of the main reasons why I left the show. So David Gerrold left, and he knows better than I how it's run, I'm sure. But like I said, he said that was one of the reasons. Gene Roddenberry, even if he pushed for a gay character or two, at the time, Paramount and all the executives at the studio might not have let him. I guess we'll never know for sure, because we'd have to, really research and go back and say who was really at fault. But it never happened. Then Gene Roddenberry passed, and Rick Berman decided for the rest of Next Gen, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, to never truly show any gay characters. I mean, they flirted with it. There's an episode called The Outcast. There's an episode called The Host. And then Deep Space Nine did something called Rejoined, which was sort of metaphorical, homophobic, or a lesbian episode, but it's sort of mired in the Trill. That's the alien species that Dax and her ex-love are a member. So it's a complicated thing. I think, of course, today now with the new shows, Discovery, I think, has two gay couples. I think they even had a gay marriage. So it's a much more open thing. But back in the 60s, back in even the 80s, 90s, it was a different world. So, but according to George Takei, Gene wanted some gay presence, but never did get it. Hope you're enjoying. Hope you're subscribing. See you soon.